Hello and welcome. We'll get started in just a few minutes. We're just gonna let some time go by for more people to trickle in. So grab a beverage, a snack, and we'll get started soon. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening, and welcome to our first event of the Tartan Family webinar series. My name is Diane Eshelman, and I am the Assistant Director for First Year Orientation and Family Engagement here at Carnegie Mellon University. Our office is delighted to have the opportunity to engage with parents and families near and far this year through the Tartan Family webinar series. Over the course of the year, we will be offering webinars curated specifically for families about topics relevant to your students' experience at Carnegie Mellon. And tonight, I am joined by colleagues from across CMU to discuss the state of COVID here in Pittsburgh and to provide more information about strategies CMU is employing to keep our community safe and engaged, whether our students are here in Pittsburgh or studying remotely. Before we get started, we wanted to go over some housekeeping reminders. We are in a webinar format, so all participants' videos are turned off and microphones are muted. We will have a Q&A portion on the second half of our hour together this evening. So feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask any questions you might have. And you can also use the raise hand feature if you would like to ask your question instead of typing it. If you're having any Zoom questions or issues, you can direct those to our technician, Andrew. His title on Zoom is Media Services via the chat function. So we're really excited to share some information with you all. And at this time, I'm going to turn things over to Maureen Deasy Morales, our AVP for Community Health and Wellbeing.
Good evening, everyone. I'm really happy to have you all here and excited to be kicking off this webinar series with all of you. This is certainly a very different start to the year than we could have planned on or ever could have guessed a year ago. And what we'd like to do tonight is to share some information about our efforts to reduce risk and to support your students this year, whether they are studying remotely, whether they are studying in person in Pittsburgh, or a combination of remote and in person. We've got members of the Community Health and Wellbeing Unit of Student Affairs here with us tonight, as well as Facilities Management, and hope to be able to answer as many questions for you as we can and provide some information for questions that you may not have even thought of at this point. In a minute, I'm going to ask panelists to introduce themselves and give just brief information about what area they work in and what their title is, and then we will go through each person after that, sharing information about their areas. So why don't we start with who I see first on my screen, Angie.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Angie Lusk. I work in wellness initiatives. I also serve as college liaison to all graduate students in the School of Computer Science. Happy to be here with you tonight.
Brian.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Coble. I'm the Director of Student Support Resources for the Division of Student Affairs. I'm also the House Fellow for Welch and Henderson Community, and I'm one of our college liaisons in the School of Engineering.
Steve.
Good evening. Steve Gunther, Assistant Vice President for Facilities Management and University Engineer. Nice to be with you.
Shane.
Hi, my name is Shane Chaplin, and I'm the Executive Director for Counseling and Psychological Services. Nice to meet you all.
Christine?
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Andrews. I'm the Chief Medical Officer. I'm the Chief Medical Officer and the Director of Clinical Operations at University Health Services. I also am the parent of a graduate from CMU, and I have a daughter at Dartmouth, so I know how people are feeling right now.
Thank you all. Happy to have everybody here with us. So I think I will kick us off with a few remarks, and then we'll go through our panelists and have them talk some about their areas. Want to talk some about how the county is working with CMU to be able to work on all of the different issues surrounding COVID. Talk about in a general sense, panelists will talk more later in more specific areas about ways that we are supporting students. So CMU in the Allegheny County Health Department, as well as the Pittsburgh area colleges and universities, in order to make the overall community safer, have been having weekly meetings together. And I actually should add, each area has been having weekly meetings. So University Health Services have all been meeting together with the county. University presidents have been meeting together. Housing services have been meeting together. So a lot of coordination and collaboration has been happening throughout the summer and into the fall with each other to make sure that all of the pieces of keeping the community safe are as coordinated as possible. In addition, University Health Services and the Allegheny County Health Department have been having regular, I would say probably almost daily, Christine will probably talk some more about that, consultations and connections, both about specific cases as well as about procedures and processes. CMU has been deputized by the county to contact trace positive and probable cases specific to CMU. So we have our own contact tracing unit here at CMU through Health Services. In general, Allegheny County cases are holding steady, and we are looking fairly good in terms of community spread. And even though college students moved in, and I'm sure you as well as us were all nervous about what that would do to the cases, we've consistently stayed under 100 new cases a day, which is a fairly good data point for a community of our size, and is holding in actually better than it was earlier in the summer. We have really high expectations for our students, faculty, and staff to work together to make sure that the mitigations we've put in place are successful. And we're communicating those daily, if not many times daily. And what I've seen so far is that for the most part, students are really doing their part to make this as successful a semester as we possibly can make it. And I'm seeing a lot of people doing what they need to do to make sure we have the best possible shot at making this a positive semester as we can. Next slide. So I wanted to share not the specific data, but where to find the specific data. If you haven't been on the CMU COVID website, you will find a treasure trove of information and data. We are adding to it every single day the information that we think is useful to you. We're always interested in hearing what people need and want to see on that. One of the things that we've updated in the last couple of weeks is more specific information about the number of COVID positive cases on campus, how those break out in terms of demographics. So you can find all those as well as county statistics on the CMU COVID website. Next slide. The other thing that I'll talk briefly about, and you'll hear a little bit more from other panelists as well, is the support for students impacted directly by COVID-19. So outreach from college liaisons and house fellows for those in isolation and quarantine. both in isolation and quarantine on campus as well as off campus. Accommodations available should a student be ill and it impact their academics and they need accommodations or adjustments either in their schedule, in the course load, in the expectations for a short time until they recover from the illness. We have financial assistance for students who are impacted for one reason or another from COVID-19. Many events and opportunities for interactions and connections while not being able to be involved in person. Many of you probably know we've actually had a moratorium on any events and gatherings for students on campus until at least September 21st, and then we are very gradually and very carefully beginning to build some in-person events in and watching to see that keeps us still in a stable state in terms of number of cases and not adding to any viral spread. But so we've really done a tremendous amount of work on making sure that there are just tons of opportunities for students to connect virtually, to interact with each other, and to find interest areas that they can be involved in. And then CAPS, which is Counseling and Psychological Services, and University Health Services are available to monitor and support students who are impacted by COVID-19. Next slide. So now I'm going to throw it over to Dr. Christine Andrews, who will talk about University Health Services.
Hi, everyone. Again, let's see if I think the video is going to pop up. But if not, okay, so we've been very busy at the health center. We recently completed our arrival testing, which was mass testing of all students who lived on campus. And then this past week, we wrapped up off-campus testing. The health center offers testing also for symptomatic students or students who are what we call close contact. And even though they may not have symptoms, they're still able to get tested at the health center. We're really proud of our walk-up window, and that's been a great feature. The students feel comfortable being tested there because they don't have to enter into the building, and our staff appreciates the barrier between them and possibly somebody with COVID. As Mo said, I have almost daily contact with the Allegheny County Health Department. I also have a weekly consultation with one of our large health organizations here and their ID specialists. I am meeting weekly with the medical directors from the 3 large institutions that we have in Pittsburgh. And on top of all of that, we are still attempting to provide primary care health services at the health center, and we are successfully doing that. We ramped up our telehealth appointments when we went into when we shut down in March. We were one of the first organizations to be back on campus so that we could see the people who needed to be seen. In order to do that, we installed 4 negative pressure rooms and have been continuing to try to get supplies so that we can support our staff with the PPE that's required for that, which is the personal protective equipment. We also would love everyone to get a flu shot this year. It is mandatory for our students. We have ordered enough that we should be able to vaccinate everyone. And I will say again that our first line of defense is wearing a mask, social distance, don't touch your face, and wash your hands. And we really would love people to be filling out the daily symptom tracker, which gives us just kind of a daily check-in on how they're doing. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Steve?
Thanks, Mo. Thanks, Christine. Good evening, everybody. Next slide, please. Let's start with an introduction about my department and facilities. We're the stewards of the campus, so we're responsible for the physical space. Here we maintain and manage 81 major buildings, and it's about 6 million square foot of space here in Pittsburgh. We do everything from all the utilities, the systems within the buildings. We make sure the buildings are clean and safe, as well as manicuring the grounds on campus. We've been here throughout the pandemic, making sure that we are preserving and working to prepare for the return of students. And one fun fact, always to close, it's kind of off topic, but I want to get a plug in for sustainability. If you didn't know, our campus is powered by 100% renewable wind energy. So if you weren't expecting to get a little nugget like that, it's a gift for you today. So what have we been doing to prepare the campus? We follow the hierarchy of controls that's shown on the screen, and this is a foundational concept for addressing campus risks and campus challenges. It consists of 5 ways to mitigate a hazard, and they're ranked in order of effectiveness, therefore our preference. So the idea behind this hierarchy is that the control methods at the top of the graphic are more protective than those at the bottom. And where does my team work? We work square in the middle on engineering controls. We're designing ways to help make this campus safer. We're not the ones that conduct the testing. We don't do the contact tracing. We haven't changed the instructional methods, but we're here to help support all of those to be more effective. Some examples, if you haven't been on our website, I'll share them on the next screen on things that we're doing. First is the density. Campus density is well below 50%. So your risk of exposure for your students here while they're on campus is significantly lower than it would be in other environments. We have 180 cleaning staff that are here. We're following both hospital and CDC standards to make sure we're disinfecting and creating a safe environment every day on our campus. We've purchased innovative technology like electrostatic sprayers to help make sure that we are disinfecting even complex surfaces. And we've installed hand sanitizers and disinfecting wipes in every learning space on campus. The public spaces have all been modified to promote physical distancing. We've literally moved thousands of pieces of furniture. We equipped over 200 learning spaces with technology that allows for both in-person and remote instruction. We've added more than 900 outdoor seats because some people feel safer studying or meeting with others or talking outside. On an HVAC and building systems perspective, we've evaluated many options for making improvement and have implemented accelerated maintenance schedules. We've maximized air ventilation. We've verified high filtration rates. We've deployed additional portable air purifiers. We're also piloting in buildings advanced technologies such as ultraviolet airflow disinfection, needlepoint, bipolar ionization, and other innovative strategies to create safer and healthier environments indoors. In terms of what we're doing in the space to remind people of those things that both Mo and Christine talked about, the CMU community uses floor decals for supporting social distancing, posters for instructions on our minimum requirements, and educational signage for tips on staying safe. We've put up more than 10,000 posters, floor decals, table tents, and other signage across campus to make sure we are continually reminding both the people who are here and the people who are here occasionally to remind them what the expectations are, what a Tartan's responsibilities involve. We continue to adapt and respond to campus needs, tweaking our, and in some cases adding new engineering controls in place. We are following the research in the fluid environment that we're in to make sure that we are always staying up to and ahead of what's needed to create a safe campus. Thanks. Next to Shane, I think.
Well, hi, everyone. I introduced myself. My name is Shane. I oversee counseling and psychological services. I'm going to wait a second to see if my video comes up. I'll keep on talking, and then as it does, let's see, there we go. So I oversee counseling and psychological services. We have 20 clinicians working. We've transitioned completely to a virtual world over Zoom. And so we're providing all of our services through Zoom. I'm going to go through some of these really quickly. You should know that we offer same-day urgent appointments to your students. And so if they have any concern, they can call us and we'll offer an appointment on the spot if they're in crisis. If not, we sometimes can take a couple of days, but we're typically going to find them an appointment relatively quickly. We also offer consultation for staff, faculty, and students, and there, I should say, also to family. And so you can call at any point if you're concerned about a student and deposit information with us. And finally, we provide referrals to community providers in psychiatry when needed. And so we're well connected with providers in the community for specialty care as well as long-term care. We also provide teletherapy, so typically would be therapy in person, right? But we've transitioned under COVID to teletherapy. We provide short-term, free and confidential care. And we're able to provide ongoing teletherapy only to the students in Pennsylvania, in the state of Pennsylvania right now. And I'll speak in a minute to services we have for out-of-state students. We also offer transitional short-term psychiatric care. And so we have a psychiatrist. Psychiatry offerings are the only ones that carry a small fee, and there's limited availability because we only have one psychiatrist. However, we're able to provide the transitional care for a student that may need psychiatric care while they get connected to somebody in the community, and we facilitate with our case managers some of those connections. Our CAPS Outreach Prevention and Education Team, or COPE, develops all of our outreach and prevention programs, and so develops workshops. Under COVID, we developed a ton of workshops over Zoom where students can attend and learn different skills such as coping with anxiety, depression, friendships, a range of different sort of support programs for students, as well as psychoeducational programming, learning about mental health. And the idea here is to teach prevention. They also work with academic and non-academic departments, go and give presentations, etc. We've also expanded our group program. We're offering all sorts of different groups for students, realizing that many of them may struggle with some things like isolation. And so we're offering interpersonal therapy groups, support groups, skill clinics, and the workshop series also that changes on a monthly basis on various topics. And finally, we offer after-hours support. And so our phone number works 24 hours a day. We have a two-tier system, and so at 5 o'clock until 9 in the morning, we have a company that answers the phone call for us. They're called Protocol. They're licensed clinicians, and they make the first assessment of whether our clinician on the ground is needed. We always have one therapist on call that serves as that second-tier support. And again, this service is designed to provide 24/7 support to students in crisis. Next slide. So one question that we get often is for our out-of-state or international students, what kind of offerings are you providing? And so we offer consultation to assess needs and provide support, immediate support to students for a variety of reasons, both in terms of licensing laws, as well as the fact that simply clinically we're sometimes not the best situated to provide services to students many states away. We don't offer that ongoing care. However, we're able to work with any student that needs us. They can call us. We'll provide immediate support and help them get connected to local providers. Whether it's within the country or outside of the country, we're going to do our best to get them connected. Two of the services that we use to do that is Thriving Campus and Psychology Today. Thriving Campus works with campuses across the country to help find providers locally. Psychology Today allows us to find providers internationally. We also, all of our out-of-state or international students can attend any of our workshops, and you can come to our website and see we change those. I'm going to speak about a few of those in a minute, but we change those on a regular basis. We have some of them on a rotating basis and some of them that are one-off. Last night, for example, we had one on self-compassion. We had one on attention. We've had a range of different services there. We also offer connection hours to different group students. For example, right now to our Black graduate students, as well as our international students, have connection hours, which are monitored by a clinician, and they serve to bring together students to be able to sort of breach some of the isolation that they may be experiencing under COVID. We also have drop-in groups in a variety of topics. Students can drop in at any time, do not have to be attended weekly, but they can come on one and then don't come for another two. As well as, again, our on-call services are also available to out-of-state and international students. Next slide. These are some examples this month of COPE workshops and trainings, again, offered to all students. For example, last night we had one on self-compassion, relating to yourself with kindness during times of struggle. We've had next week, I believe, navigating family expectations for international students. Question, Persuade, Respond is a national evidence-based suicide prevention training. We offer that on a rotating basis. We also offer on a rotating basis mental health first aid, which is the golden standard for mental health training. It's an 8-hour training in person. We're offering it as a 6-hour training virtually. This is an example, so Black graduate student connection hour, of some of the connection hour spaces that we're creating for support, for students to find support with each other. Our connection hour with our immigrant community, titled Reclaiming Space. Those are again on a rotating basis, on a weekly basis. And mindfulness and technology, reclaiming our capacity for attention, presence, and connection. These are again offered this month, but we change them on a monthly basis. And so if you come to our website, you'll see how to sign up, or your students will see how to sign up. Next slide. And finally, I want to give you some examples of some of our group services. The full support groups, more therapy oriented groups offered for in-state students. Right now, we have a group for PhD students, Black women, master students, women, undergraduate students, and there's a few more. We have some full skill clinics. These are groups that focus on a particular skill, body image, depression management, self-compassion, anxiety management, insomnia. And so these are also, sometimes they're offered in a 4 or 6 session clinic. And then drop-in groups, as I was mentioning before, are offered to all students. And so we have a support group for students with COVID-19 that we're developing, as well as a support group for anxiety management, a mindfulness group, home and family, how to manage family expectations, as well as family relationships for those students that are back at home, as well as grief and loss for students, particularly who may have experienced during this time a variety of different kinds of losses under COVID. And so I'm happy to answer any questions about any of these services, but that will be it for me for now. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. I will try to be quick because I know we'll have good fodder during our question and answer. Again, Angie, I work in wellness initiatives. I think the one thing that really hasn't changed about all of our work is that it is so relationally based. I pride in the 12 years that I've worked at Carnegie Mellon, the thing that makes me most proud is that we really try to identify the pulse that's happening on campus. And in this situation, both that's remote and in this hybrid format, but also those that are stepping foot on campus, to think about what are the needs of our campus community and how can we reach those best. One of the things that I work on are campus-wide initiatives. So making sure communication goes out to our campus community about what type of wellness offerings we are affording to all campus community members, and not just through my department, but really what lectures are happening in the academic space, what resources are local to the Pittsburgh community. Most of these truly are accessible to any of our students, regardless of their location. We also want to make sure that we are remaining present for each other and for, especially ourselves in this time of so much change and uncertainty. So we've always been a thought leader, I'd like to think, in the mindfulness and meditation space. We're one of the first campuses that have offered Headspace as the free subscription to our entire campus community. We're really ramping up those resources and that relationship with Headspace to talk about what it means to have movement in our lives in a mindful way, to be more focused in our work, given the multiple distractions that are happening for us. In fact, as part of our homecoming weekend next month, we'll actually be doing a live Headspace meditation with one of their co-voices, Eve Lewis. She's incredible, and she's really going to talk about how do you stay present for yourself and for the people that you care about during these times. In addition to that, we continue to do pet therapy. We're actually starting next week. We have transitioned our pet therapy to a virtual space, but we're also now using it to connect our students to our faculty and staff members. So if one of our staff or faculty have a beloved pet, next week we'll be featuring one of our college, School of Computer Science faculty members and her husky. So it's really about forming relationships outside of the traditional roles that we might serve at CMU. A lot of what I've heard from students is that they're really yearning for those social outlets to connect authentically, not just with their peers and their friends, but with faculty and staff as well. And so much of the work that we're doing in the wellness space is offering those quality times together. In fact, every Monday Monday at 4:30, we just have a wellness check-in where anyone can stop in, kind of talk about what's working, what's not, what is a habit that they're trying to maybe form that they would like an accountability partner with. Really just being honest in the moment that some things are going really well and some things are not going so well, and how do we support ourselves in those spaces. We do a lot of education, obviously in collaboration with my other community health and well-being partners. And part of that really is about connecting with faculty, students, and staff, seeing what they want, and then tailoring those needs. So everything from finding our focus right now in ways that are unique and maybe specific to these last 6 months and continued time of unrest and uncertainty, but also thinking about how do we stay connected to each other, how do we give ourselves some compassion in these spaces, how do we manage expectations if our goals don't look similar to the goals that we had last fall, and certainly making sure that we're also talking about conflict de-escalation, having hard dialogue and conversations with ourselves and with the people we care about, etc. So I'd be happy to talk more about those. Diane, if you can share the next slide. One of the ways that we keep people engaged is through, as I mentioned, these newsletters. That includes the CAPS events D-list if you're looking specifically for that information, but also we want to make sure that students are aware of our Headspace subscription. We have over 6,000 active users on that. Interestingly enough, sleep and sleep health is one of the primary features in that. So if you have a family member who's at Carnegie Mellon and is excited about kind of thinking about their sleep, or maybe they're worried about how they're managing their sleep so far, the Headspace subscription has some really great resources in that arena. And then of course, at large, we want to make sure that our students are engaged in our student affairs calendar, which is really the compilation of all of the different activities and events that are happening at Carnegie Mellon, mostly in virtual format at this point. So anyone has the ability to engage, and that really has a broad array of appeal and topics and themes, something to fit everyone's interest. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian. I'm glad to be on the call tonight and to share a little bit more about some of the student support resources that exist. So Diane, you go to the next slide, please. Angie talked about, kind of the relational nature of the work that we do, and the support that we've provided to students has always been really built around those meaningful relationships with students. So a lot of what I'm talking about today is, taking existing structures and roles that people play on campus and kind of adjusting them to address the realities of the pandemic and the needs of our students. So, this is dynamic, and we're always looking at ways to adjust this and work on this. But one of the things that's really special about Carnegie Mellon is that every student here does have a primary student affairs staff member who's their point person. And that's information that every student has access to in the SIO. So if they log in right alongside their academic advisor and their associate dean in their college and their hub liaison, they can see who their student affairs staff member is, and who they can rely on for help and support with all sorts of things. So pandemic related, not pandemic related. We're always there to be, the go-to person for a student. If they live in campus housing, or are a first-year student who's engaging in one of the virtual house communities this year, their primary student affairs contact is their house fellow. Like I said, I'm the house fellow for Welch and Henderson, so all the students who live in Welch and Henderson know that I'm their person if they need anything at all. For students who live off campus as undergrads and all of our graduate students, those folks are supported by our college liaison group. And a lot of us wear multiple hats. So I'm also the college liaison in the College of Engineering for Civil and Environmental Engineering and Material Science. So we all work with those students. So I saw there was a question in the chat about, who's there to support, or what support look like for a student who lives off campus. That would be their college liaison, and that information is right there in SIO. Specifically as it relates to the COVID-19 circumstance, House Fellows and college liaisons are playing a really active role in providing support to students at large, because everyone is concerned about the pandemic, and it's an influence on campus that people definitely need support around. But for students who are, diagnosed as a positive test for COVID-19, or who are identified as a close contact of someone who has tested positive, House Fellows and College Liaisons are providing direct support to those students as they are quarantining and isolating. College liaisons in particular are providing support to students in the academic space. So if they're going to not be attending class in person, or they're not feeling well, and they need to not be participating in class for a period of time, their college liaison is helping them to have those conversations with their faculty and their the dean's offices in their different colleges to make sure people are aware of that and to advocate for students who need flexibility. That's something we always do for students who are sick or have complicated personal circumstances that are pulling them away from their studies. But in particular, we're really working hard to do that well for students who are impacted by COVID. Another thing I wanted to highlight, and Mo had this on the slide at the beginning, is folks in the Student Support Resources group are working really closely with our colleagues in the Hub and financial aid around some emergency financial support for students. They're thanks to some really, really generous supporters of the university, we have the Tartan Emergency Support Fund, which allows us to help students with some very particular financial needs that are unanticipated because of COVID-19. And we always offer an emergency student loan program that's not for tuition or fees, but it's for those unexpected things that pop up that students don't anticipate but find themselves needing help for. And all of the details about that are on that link that I shared. So, really taking advantage of our ecosystem of support in some different ways this year. But if you only remember one thing, I think it's, your students should know who their student affairs contact is. And if they need help accessing any of the great resources or supports that you heard about from my colleagues, they want to explore CAPS, but they're anxious about doing it, or they don't know how to take advantage of the health center or health services, reaching out to their house fellow or their college liaison is a great first step to getting them connected with whatever they might need. So I can leave it there, and I think I'm turning it back over to Mo.
Thanks, everyone. I think we will jump to a question and answer period, and we've got a number of questions in the question and answer section. So please feel free to enter those there. There's also a raise hand function that you can use as well, and we'll try to get as many of the questions as we can. First question that I think, Steve, I'm going to throw to you is, what specifically has been done to the HVAC systems in student residence halls to ensure that the virus is not spread through indoor air?
Great question. We know that HVAC has been in the news throughout, changing headlines. The research on it and the information has evolved over the summer. Actually, some of the scientists and researchers on campus were signatories to the letter that went to the WHO, trying to bring more attention to the possibility for spread through aerosol for the virus. And we've monitored and worked very closely with our researchers in the Center for Atmospheric Research about what the possible vectors can be in our buildings, because we operate housing buildings, research buildings, athletic buildings, academic buildings, all types of buildings that have all different HVAC systems. And we're also scanning to look where were outbreaks happening worldwide. The good news is that there are no reported worldwide outbreaks in apartment buildings related to HVAC, and we were looking at that as we were planning the actions we were going to take in housing specific spaces. So our housing work is focused primarily on accelerating maintenance schedules over the summer to make sure all the equipment was operating properly, that the filtration was in place to make sure that that was going to be safe. We also looked at making sure windows were operating so that if students wanted to open their windows for fresh air because they felt safer from that dimension, that was also going to be able to provide additional ventilation for them in their space. So lots of work, and we continue to watch. And HVAC is a main area that we're focused on from engineering controls.
Thank you, Steve. I just saw a quick comment in the chat that said the buildings that now have the windows that open are looking better and better every day. And that's actually, we're building a new health and wellness and athletics facility. And one of the features we're really excited about is windows that open.
Yeah, Carnegie Mellon for a long time, for 20 years actually, has been committed to building to green standards and LEED standards. And one of the elements that are incorporated there is focusing on indoor air quality. Those things also have been extremely beneficial for us for COVID. And so things like creating natural ventilation, high filtration rates in spaces are all elements of green design and all part of what CMU has been committed to for a long time.
Thank you. Christine, I'm going to throw this question to you. There's a question about cost of health services and what health services are available at no cost and what have a cost associated with them.
The health service works on what we call a nurse triage model. The first interaction that a student has when it used to be walk-in or call, but now it's when they call first, is they'll speak to one of our nurses who will ask them some questions, figure out who they need to see. And that person might be another nurse. They may be able to answer the questions themselves. It may be one of our providers, and we have five full-time nurse practitioners and PAs, and then myself. If you have the student health insurance, just about every service that's available at the health center is covered. If you have outside health insurance and you've signed up you've gotten the waiver for the year, the costs at the health center are very minimal. It would be equivalent to paying your copay to go see your, and probably less to go see your primary care doctor, certainly less than going to an urgent care or an emergency room. The costs for medications are also very inexpensive. We have a small pharmacy, or dispensary, we call it, but still those costs are very low compared to using most insurances at outside pharmacies. COVID testing is, for the most part, if you have symptoms, covered by your health insurance. If somebody had outside health insurance and needed to have COVID testing at the health center, this is not the mass testing that I'm talking about. If they needed to have COVID testing at the health center, we would collect their insurance information and bill the insurance. The antibody testing is not something that's been covered by insurance. We are not recommending that. It's also not recommended by the CDC, and is well over $100. And we're not using that in any kind of guidelines or protocols right now. So that's not something that we're doing or recommending.
Yeah, I will add to that the university for symptomatic students is committed to making sure that there are no costs passed on to students. So for any amount that your insurance would not cover for symptomatic students or for a student who was a close contact, that's covered. For asymptomatic testing, that is also fully covered by the university. I'm going to jump to a question on campus shuttles. Can you tell us what steps are being taken to ensure campus shuttles are safe and sanitary? And would you recommend that students use the shuttles instead of the Pittsburgh bus system? Steve?
Yeah, thanks. So we know that there are concerns people have about riding public transportation, and use of both our shuttles and Pittsburgh public transportation are down dramatically. Overall, I'll talk about what's happening in both areas. On our shuttles, everyone, including the driver, is required to wear a mask. We have plexiglass installed, separates the driver from the passengers. There are hand sanitizers and wipes that are available for self-cleaning your seat as you come in, if you choose. And all of the shuttles are fully disinfected every evening at the end of their routes. Our ridership is significantly lower than normal, so there is adequate space in our shuttles. We've also added to our customer service training for our drivers, de-escalation training, to make sure they're fully equipped if there are riders on the shuttle who are not following the requirements, that we can address those in a proactive and positive manner. And lastly, we've looked, because we know that there is a preference for using the shuttles versus Pittsburgh public transportation, even though both have low risk. We looked and did a heat map of where students that have returned to Pittsburgh are living off campus. And we've actually modified our routes to serve populations that weren't on previous shuttle routes, because that's where students are. And we want to make sure that they do continue to have access to campus. So I won't tell you to choose one or the other, but I will tell you that ours, we have taken lots of actions in our shuttles, both for protection of students and the protection of our drivers.
Thank you, Steve. Christine, another question for you. How does quarantine work? If a person in your residence hall tests positive, does everyone in that pod go into quarantine?
When we first had everybody come to campus and they were quarantined in their pod, if someone were to test positive, the pod would go into quarantine. When the 14-day quarantine ended, some people will interact with other people outside their pod and could have close contacts from other locations. We have quarantine and isolation housing available on campus for those that are living on campus. The separation between quarantine and isolation is quarantine is for somebody who does not have symptoms, and isolation is for somebody who does have symptoms or is already positive. Even in isolation, though, people have their own bedroom and their own bathroom, and food is delivered to them.
Thank you, Christine. Could you talk a little bit also about what qualifies as a close contact?
A close contact is somebody who you've been within 6 feet of for more than 15 minutes with or without a mask. So we love that you're wearing a mask, but what we really want is social distancing of 6 feet. And if you do that, you won't be a close contact of just about anybody. That's very hard with a roommate if you're sharing a bedroom or a housemate. But that's the very crisp definition. And so it's not walking past somebody on campus or doing a 5-minute walk with them across campus and you're within 3 feet. That would not qualify as a close contact.
Thank you. Christine and I will both try to tag team on this next set of questions. There's a number of questions about asymptomatic testing or regular surveillance testing of students. We, as most of you know, just finished arrival testing of all residential students and then offered to off-campus students in Pittsburgh asymptomatic testing, arrival testing this week, and for the next 3 weeks, we have begun random sampling, asymptomatic testing of students, and UHS has done a yeoman's job of pulling that off and offering that several days a week. You can expect to hear, as parents and families of students, continual ramping up of asymptomatic and surveillance testing of students in the next few weeks, but know that that is going to be increasing significantly here shortly. Christine, you want to talk a little bit about symptomatic testing? That might be helpful as well.
Right. So for the daily symptom tracker, that is sent to the student every day, faculty and staff also, but for the students, it's sent to them every day and they're asked to fill it out. It asks about questions of symptoms of COVID, but also if they've been within, if they're a close contact of somebody in the last 2 weeks. If they answer yes to any of the questions, we ask them to call the health center. The nurse will take their history, find out what symptoms they're having, and they will offer them a test that day usually. We are testing 6 days a week right now. They come up to the test window and we do, if they have symptoms, we do a rapid test that takes 15 minutes to result. If the rapid test is negative, we reflex to what's called a PCR, and that is sent to our local lab where our turnaround time has been about 2 days to get that result. We ask them to isolate until they get their results, and if they live on campus, they will be moving to isolation housing if they have symptoms. If they live off campus, we ask them to isolate in their residence.
Thank you. Shane, I'm going to throw a question to you. Does health insurance, student health insurance, but I would also include other health insurance, cover mental health treatment, for instance, psychological therapy sessions? And are there certified or licensed mental health therapist available on site?
So yes, it does, although it does not need it. Student mental health is not needed to get services from CAPS. All of our services, except for psychiatry, are free. However, if the student was out of state and needed services in their own state, let's say the student was in California, then we could help find somebody that would take that insurance, student health insurance, and they would get all those services also completely paid for by Aetna. The other question was, we have providers on site. We do. All of our services are provided virtually now through Zoom Healthcare, which is a confidential platform that allows us, a HIPAA-protected platform that allows us to provide teletherapy. If your students within the state of Pennsylvania, they just can call us anytime, set up an appointment, and we'll meet with them. We have right now about 20 clinicians. The majority of those are licensed psychologists, as well as LPCs and social workers.
Thank you, Shane.
Sure.
There are a couple questions about the spring semester. What is the schedule going to look like? Will it be hybrid learning? What are the criteria for increasing number of students on campus going into spring? So I will try to tackle a few of those. And if anyone has pieces that I have missed, feel free to jump in. The university has announced in the last week generally what the spring schedule is going to look like to students. And the spring semester will be pushed back to have a pushback start of February 1st with a not much of a spring break, but some sprinkled days off throughout the spring semester to be able to get in the adequate number of weeks. And a number of reasons for that. One is that we want to try to get all of us through as much of the flu season as we possibly can. And we also want to reduce the amount of travel back and forth in and out of the area as much as possible too, to also reduce risk of viral transmission. We do plan on it most likely being another semester of hybrid learning. In terms of the question about when and how would we increase density, we've got a lot of efforts going on right now with a pretty intense work looking at campus density and how that interacts with positive COVID cases. And so we are really watching that and monitoring that literally on a daily basis. There's a coordinating group that meets every morning that looks at that data and analyzes it. And as we look at it, and if we see that we are able to minimize spread or maintain a stable kind of presence in terms of viral spread, we will try to gradually increase and be measuring that and monitoring that and assessing as we go. So for example, in the next week or two, we'll begin to allow undergrads to rejoin some of the laboratory projects and research projects and see how that goes in a very limited way. And we've done that step by step all along, phasing in a little at a time and seeing what works and what doesn't work on that. Let's see if we have any. There's a question here about wastewater testing. And I know Steve's got some expertise in that area. Steve wondered if you could talk about things we've looked at with wastewater testing.
We have. It's one of the areas that we looked at where we thought facilities could support the testing strategy on campus. And so we evaluated our campus wastewater system. We work with our local municipality, Alcosan, which is doing testing on Pittsburgh's water, not publicizing the results, but we talked to the operators at Alcosan and they're doing it, as well as we had several meetings with BioBot, which is an MIT startup that has been the primary, if you look at the media reports and who's making the biggest progress. We also talked to folks at Syracuse University, at University of Colorado, at Northern Arizona and a number of other campuses. We have not implemented it for a number of different reasons on campus, primarily because the way our system lays out and ties into the city system, it's difficult for us to be able to take the sampling needed to be able to do the analytics. But we're continuing to look at that as a strategy that we may be able to implement, or as the information from these campuses starts to come out, seeing how they're translating the results and the trending that they have, it may help us implement that in the future.
Thank you, Steve. We have a question about how many students are currently in isolation or quarantine on campus. And as of 6 p.m. this evening, I believe it was 12. So we're doing, yep, we've got some nods there, people confirming that. So we're doing okay there. You can also look on the COVID website. You will see a dashboard indicator of percent of quarantine and housing used, I believe. This is a great question for all the panelists. Overall, how would you describe the vibe on campus?
Go ahead, Steve.
No, you please.
I was going to say, I live in the near campus neighborhood, and I walk my dog on campus a lot and around campus a lot. And it's been really, really interesting. It's definitely different than a typical fall, understandably. I do think, you know, from the students that I'm meeting with, I'm trying to have one-on-one meetings with all of my students that live in my residence hall community. And, you know, they're really reporting like the same kinds of enthusiasm about getting involved in campus activities and student orgs, even though that looks different. We're starting to see more use of some of the outdoor fitness and recreation spaces. Athletics and other folks in the division have done a really good job of preparing those spaces so that students can use them in responsible ways right now. So that's been really exciting. You see people go into class, you talk to students about their, you know, their academic commitments, and that feels very comparable to the conversations I've had in other years. I can see Angie nodding at that. So yeah, I think the vibe is different. There's less people around, and, you know, people are definitely being cognizant of our responsibilities to each other and to the community. But I think there definitely is more energy on campus than there was a month ago, for sure.
Yeah, I'll add, and it's been, for me, incredible to be here as each waves come back. We started with the essential personnel, and then the return to research groups that came back first, then return to instruction groups that were phased in after. And each group that's come in, it's been amazing how they are really creating a different relationship, very positively focused on how do we do the work of the university in a way that keeps us all safe. And the students have continued that trend. And so the vibe on campus, and I think the culture on campus, is one where everybody is here incredibly respectful of each other. And every student that I'm interacting with, as we're creating, as Brian mentioned, seating outside and other things, you know, we're asking them for feedback. What can we do to make the experience that you're having here, you know, as close as possible as we can to the one that you want? And they've all been open with giving us ideas, and the way that they're treating each other has been wonderful.
I call it our new normalcy, and we have to get comfortable with it and figure out how to make it work for us, because it's an important part of their developmental lives, is to be able to come to college.
Thank you all. I think we're going to end on that question. It's a good question to end with. Diane has a few words for us, I think.
Thank you all for joining us tonight and for the very insightful questions. If you have any additional questions, or if you have questions that we were not able to get to tonight, please email parents@andrio.cmu.edu. This is the email address for our Office of Family Engagement, and we will either answer your questions or direct your question to one of the panelists on here tonight. Thank you to our panelists for your time and for sharing information about campus and what is happening here in Pittsburgh. For our families, we look forward to seeing you at our upcoming webinars. We have one next week, Wednesday, September 23rd at 7:30, entitled Fraternity and Sorority Info Family Session about recruitment if your student is interested in Greek life. And then on October 7th, there's been a date change, so it's now October 7th at 7:30 p.m. We'll be joined by the Student Academic Success Center for Student Academic Success 101 online learning, best practices, strategies, and advice. And again, that's October 7th at 7:30. And then please be on the lookout for emails from our office and on our webpage for more webinars, as more webinars will be added throughout the rest of the year. So thank you all so much. I hope you all stay safe and have a great rest of your evening.